Welcome back to the Beer Junkies. We have designed our Irish Stout recipe, so now it's time to brew it. Follow along as we go through all the steps that you need to take in order to brew an Irish Stout. And welcome back. The first thing as always is I am measuring out my salt to get my water profile where I want it. For the Irish Stout, it is important to remember that these dark grains will lower the pH. They are very acidifying. So you're gonna want to add a pH buffer such as baking soda or pickling lime or both. So for our water profile, we're shooting for 93 parts per million of calcium, 47 parts per million of sulfate, 44 parts per million of chloride, 29 parts per million of sodium, and we are adding calcium chloride, gypsum, and Epsom salt. But in addition to that, we are adding baking soda and pickling lime to bump up our bicarbonates to 245 parts per million. This will prevent our pH from dropping way below what we really want it to be at, which is 5.2 to 5.3. If we did not add those, as you saw in our recipe development video, it would drop down to about 4.8, which is absolutely no good. It will not lead to a pleasant beer. So we have to add those to keep that pH where we want it to. So I'm going to mix these into the mash tun. Make sure they're all stirred in well. And then once these are stirred in, I will continue filling up the mash tun until we get to the right volume and the temperature of about 161 degrees, so that when we mash in, the strike water will drop to 152 degrees, where we will hold it there for 60 minutes before mashing out. And I will show you these steps as we get there. But first I will add this. And our water profile is all set. One thing I wanted to mention about the dark grains before we get started is that if you do not have a way of measuring the pH of your water, or you don't have an idea of what your water profile is, I would recommend adding your dark grains in after mash is done, right before mash out. This will not totally fix a low pH, but it will allow your base malts to get that 5.3, 5.4 pH before adding those dark grains in, and it will prevent it from dropping way down into the fours, which will really impact the taste of your beer. So if you are not able to add baking soda, pickling lime, or anything that will buffer that pH, add them after the mash. So we have everything mashed in now. We're going to mash at 152 degrees for 60 minutes. Once we reach that 60-minute mark, we're going to mash out to 168 degrees, and then we will begin to sparge. We just got to mash out at 168 degrees, so now we're doing our transfer. So we are pulling the brewing water from the bottom of the hot liquor tank. We are filling up the mash tun from the top, which is rinsing all the residual sugars that are in the grains. That is being pumped over from the bottom of the mash tun into the boil kettle. Once it's all transferred, we're going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to boil it for 90 minutes. All right, we have our wort going at a boil. We're going to boil this for 90 minutes. We'll add our hops in as needed. At the very end, we'll add a yeast nutrient and whirlpool tablets to really clear it up. But we will be back when it's time for the whirlpool. All right, we finished our boil, and now we're doing the whirlpool. You can see it is pulling all of the proteins, hops, and everything else right into that vortex in the center, putting it to the bottom of this boil kettle so we do not transfer it into the fermenter during knockout. We just finished the whirlpool, so now we are doing knockout. So we are pulling the wort from the boil kettle, pushing it through our pump, through our heat-resistant hose, through the heat exchanger. Right now we're going through a little bit below 60, so I need to speed it up just a smidge. Going through the rest of this hose, all the way down into our fermenter, and you can see it is bubbling away. So I'll be back when it's time to pitch the yeast. Now that the wort is all knocked out, we're going to pitch our yeast. We ferment the Irish Stout at 67 degrees. Once it drops to about 10-14 in specific gravity, we will raise the temperature up to 72 degrees for the diacetyl rest to make sure the fermentation really finishes. Once we finish fermentation, we will transfer it to the bright tank, carbonate it to 2.7 volumes, and then keg it. And with that, we are all done. This is the Irish Stout that we just designed and brewed. It is beautifully opaque with a tan head. It's got the roasty, chocolatey notes. It is very drinkable. We are over the age of 21. We do not condone underage drinking. Please drink responsibly. Cheers.